In the summer of 1919, tragedy struck a small mining community in northeast Pennsylvania. As miners were shuttling in mine cars to the mine, the combination of sparks from the trolley wire and fuel from a miner's lamp started a fire. And the fire tore through the freshly mined coal. And it happened quick. And after the fire passed, 92 men and boys died. And while burns were still being tended to and limbs were being amputated from this fire, 13 men from this community came to the local school and they started to sing. They sang because they were Welsh. And as one famous Welshman puts it, singing is in my people like sight is in the eye. Welsh people from the country of Wales, which is in the United Kingdom, have a long tradition of singing, starting back in the 12th century and carrying through and being strengthened again in the 18th century, when the nation saw a large influx of immigrants that came to the country because of the iron and the coal industries. And Wales was heavily influenced throughout all of their history, but especially in this 18th century by the church. And as one historian explains, in an unfamiliar new surroundings, these Welsh people found solace and sociability in song. Men and women found comfort from the daily industrial grind in their chapels, which were springing up like dragon's teeth. By 1900, there were more than 5,000 of them, dominating both the skyline and the social and cultural life of the people. And so song became part of Welsh culture, so much so that I found this quote by one Welshman. This is what he says: "I think that the reason I never cared for drink is this: the ease from mental pain that other men have sought in alcohol, I always found in song. The whole land of Wales echoes with folk songs of a people who sing because they must." The Welsh way of life, so influenced by the Christian church and Christian tradition, is one example of what God's people have done for thousands of years. That when in the face of tragedy, in the face of suffering, in the face of mental pain, they have sung. They've sung to God. And today, as part of our series on the Psalms, we get to look at Psalm 57, which is a gift of God to us, the church, to sing and pray when we are in distress. And as you turn there, Psalm 57, I would encourage you to turn there. You will get more out of me talking today if you turn there and look closely with me. We'll see that the song divides up into two halves. And since we're talking about songs, I'm going to say two verses, which can be confusing because there's 11 verses, but there's two verses in this song. Verses 1 through 5 is the first verse. It's a verse of plea. And verses 6 through 11 is the second verse in this song, and it's a verse of praise. So would you read with me? I'm going to read the first verse, a verse of plea, which is 1 through 5. To the choir master, according to Do Not Destroy, a miktam of David, when he fled from Saul in the cave. Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful, for in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge, till the storms of destruction pass by. I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame him who tramples on me. God will send out his steadfast love and his faithfulness. My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts, the children of man, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Let me pray one more time for us. Jesus, would your glory be above the heavens, and would you be exalted, Lord, in how we worship over this song today, Lord. Would our hearts be renewed and reminded of the joy and life that we have in Jesus. We pray this in your name, amen. When we look at verse 1, we see the situation. David is seeking refuge. And we see quickly his response. He looks for that refuge from God. He looks up in his time of need and he says, "Be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful, for in you my soul takes refuge." As humans, when we have a problem, we go to the person or the thing that we think will meet that need. If you have a lot of money, maybe that's a problem. You go to a banker and he puts it away for you. If you need fishing tackle, you go to the sporting goods store and you get it there. Here, the problem that David has is that he needs refuge. And where does he go? He goes to God. He doesn't go first to a psychiatrist. He doesn't go to his friends. He doesn't go to his family. He goes to God. So the question is, why does he go to God? Can God help him? Can God help you? Let's look closely at the verse. Verse 1. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by. August 23rd, 2005, the National Hurricane Center issued its first warning about a tropical system about 350 miles east of Miami. A couple days later, that tropical storm had strengthened to a Category 3 hurricane, and they called it Katrina. And then it slammed into Louisiana and all of the states along the Gulf Coast. Winds were 140 miles per hour. The storm was 400 miles wide. And for those of you who remember the footage and the stories, the destruction was enormous. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced from their homes. It caused $100 billion worth of damage. And if you watch the news during that time, there was video clips of people on their rooftops because 80% of the area was submerged in water, and whole neighborhoods and cities were submerged, and people had to climb up onto their roof, and they were helpless until the National Guard came by and rescued them. The event that happens in David's life and events that happen in our lives make us feel like helpless sufferers, stranded and exposed on the top of a roof, waiting for help. And for David, when this happens to him, he seeks refuge in the wings of the living God. Pastor Jacob pointed out to me and others in our sermon collaboration that David is really purposeful in his language here. When David wants to talk about God's protective and powerful presence, he uses wings because David's been reading his Bible. For David, his Bible was mainly the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And when David opened up his Bible, he saw that God's wings, God as protective wings, was talked about in 2 places. The first is in Genesis 1. It talks about the Spirit of God fluttering over the waters when it's still formless and void, just before God speaks the world into life, and it starts to teem with living beings and living creatures. David knows that the God in whom he seeks refuge is the God who spoke into existence the clouds and the storms and the winds. The second place where this language of God's wings is used is in Deuteronomy 32. And it's actually a song of Moses. And the song is about God's protection of Israel. And here's what it says. God found Israel in a desert land, like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, that spreads out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions. The Lord alone guided him. No foreign god was with him. David knows that the God in whom he seeks refuge is the God of Israel, who rained down 10 plagues on Egypt, who split the Red Sea for Israel to walk through, and who guided an entire nation and provided for them food and drink through a desert wasteland. David knows the God that he's crying out to. And when he's in trouble, he seeks refuge and turns to God because he believes what he has been told about the creating and the saving God, and that this God is able to help, that God can help him. But the question is, will God help him? Maybe you believe this morning that there is a God and he's probably powerful and he probably is able to help you in your troubles, but will he help you in your troubles? Just because someone is able to help does not mean that they will help. We know that from daily life. So what gives David confidence? Let's keep reading carefully, verse 2 and 3. I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame him who tramples on me. God will send out his steadfast love and faithfulness. Doesn't that almost seem presumptuous? He's crying out to the God of creation, and he says, God, I know you will save me. It almost seems audacious that he would address the Most High God in this way. It's a little bit like me approaching Elon Musk, one of the richest people in the world. And me coming up to him and saying, Mr. Musk, I know that you are super rich, the Most High rich. And I know that you'll come down from your private jet and you will cut me a check to help me buy a house in this crazy housing market. Right? He would look at me and he would say, who are you? And if we feel the silliness of that scenario, how much more silly should it be for David to approach the living God, the Most High God, and to say, I know that you will send and save me? How can David be so confident? Again, David has been reading his Bible. And what he's found in his Bible has transformed his understanding of who the living God is. David has found out that the God of the universe is a promising God. When David walks in the fields or when David looks up from the mountain, he sees that God is powerful. And we see that. Everybody, maybe who's not even a believer, we can see that God is powerful. But when we look to this book, when we look to what he has revealed to us and what he's done in the history of Israel, we find something even more amazing. Not just God is powerful, but he uses that power and he makes promises to people. God makes promises of steadfast love and faithfulness. Look at verse 3. These are the key words that help us understand how David can be so confident and why the promising God is on his mind. Love and faithfulness are words in the Bible that go together. In English, there's a couple examples of these. Nice and warm, or sick and tired. For you grammar nerds, it's called a hendiadys. It's a real thing. And so in biblical Hebrew, when scholars have noticed that when these words come together, it's kind of filled with more meaning than meets the eye. That it should send readers back to God's covenants or God's promises. And these promises or covenants are so important to us who want to see what's true in the Bible because it shows us how God relates to humans. We should be interested in that, right? Like if there is a God, if he is all-powerful, we should be particularly interested in what he thinks about us or how he relates to us. And that is where covenants are important, or God's promises. A covenant is a relational promise of love and loyalty, or steadfast love and faithfulness. In other words, promises of steadfast love and faithfulness is the way that the Bible teaches us Christians. That's how the Almighty God relates to you. Promises of love and faithfulness. And it says more. It doesn't just say that God makes those promises. It says that those promises of love and faithfulness flow out of him. In Exodus 34, a really unique point in the Bible where God is before Moses, and he says, I'm going to make my glory pass before you. I'm going to tell you who I am. He says, Yahweh, Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. I want to remind you through the word this morning that the God of the universe is one who abounds in steadfast love and faithfulness. And maybe what you're going through right now, or what you've seen, or the wrestlings, you're wrestling with, is God really loving? And the Bible tells us that God abounds, that's his heart. He abounds and he makes promises of steadfast love and faithfulness. David is in dire straits here in this psalm. He needs help. He needs refuge from the storms of destruction. He needs protection from what in verse 4 feels like lions and fiery beasts, from those humans whose teeth are like spears and tongues are like sharp swords. And what does he do? He knows that he can go to God. God is able to help. And he knows that he runs to God because he knows that God will help him. He has heard and he has believed these things about the living God. Even in his suffering. It says in Lamentations 3, "For the Lord will not cast off forever, but though he cause grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love." And here it is. "For he does not afflict from his heart or grieve the children of man." So that's David, a descendant of Abraham, an Israelite who stands in the line of God's Old Testament promises, and who, in fact, received his own direct promises from God. But what about me? And what about you? Can we really pray with David, "God will send from heaven and save me"? To answer that, we need to fill out our understanding of God's promises in the Old Testament just a little bit more. We can summarize the structure of God's promises in the Old Testament like this. God says, "I will bind myself to you if you bind yourself to me." And if that's how we summarize his promises, the way we summarize the Old Testament story is God was faithful to his promises and his people were never faithful to theirs. Over and over and over again, God graciously renews and makes new promises, and he's met with Israelites who break their promises, people like you and like me. And the result of that is broken lives and broken hearts. When we don't bind ourselves to God in return, we suffer the consequences. But through the story of the Old Testament, there are hints and there are murmurings of one big promise, one final promise, that God will do all of the promise keeping. He'll not only be the promise maker, but he'll be the promise keeper. He'll put it in the hearts of his people to bind themselves to him because of his faithfulness. He invites us into his faithful promise keeping. And when we turn to the New Testament, we see how he decides and executes and keeps this one big promise. It's in his Messiah, Jesus. And we read about the ministry of Jesus, why Jesus comes in John 6. He says, "I've come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day." Can we really pray with David, "God will send from heaven and save me"? The answer is yes. Not my answer, God's answer is yes. Every promise of God finds its yes and amen in Jesus. And because of Jesus, we can be united to that faithful and abounding, steadfast love. And so we get to the refrain of the psalm. This refrain pops up in verse 5 and then again at verse 11. It's, "Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth." At first read, this might seem like an oddly placed refrain in a song of distress. It would be like you getting sick, going to the doctor, and in the middle of your visit, you cry out, "Be healthy, O doctor," as if the health of the doctor had anything to do with you getting better. But that's exactly what it's like in this song, in this psalm. David needs help, and the refrain of the psalm is, "Be exalted, God, be glorified." How does that make any sense? He does this because he knows that God has bound himself to mankind in such a way that the exaltation and glorification of God is the exaltation and glorification of his people. He brings us with him. The glory of God is not opposed to the joy of man. In fact, the glory of God is the joy of man and the refuge of man. We are weak. We cannot rise above the storms of destruction. We cannot live in the presence of fiery beasts or survive the puncture wounds of the sharp teeth of the children of man. But Jesus has suffered and survived and has vanquished all of that under his feet. God has acted himself, and by faith we're united to him in his victory. So when David and we sing in our distress, "Be exalted, O God, be glorified," we sing because we know that our song to for God's glorification is our song for deliverance. They are the same thing. And we're now in a position to take a step back and to understand what this song and what this psalm is about. It both teaches us through its content and gives us a song to actually perform what the song is about. And it's this: bind yourself to God's promises with praise. We need to bind ourselves to God's promises with praise. God has bound himself to us through promises and his ultimate promise in Jesus. What he requires of us is to look on that faithful promise keeping in faith, even in our suffering. But why singing? Why do we need to sing to bind ourselves to God's promise? Research has shown that singing is special, that it uses both halves of our brain when we sing, that it's both a psychological and a physiological thing. That, and I'm not going to go into the details, but it releases hormones. Singing is like a thing that's unique in how the human body responds to it and participates in it. And when we sing praises, we deliberately engage our minds and our bodies in an act of faith, in an act that renews our vision and our understanding of reality. To sing for the glory of God to spread over all the earth is maybe to say more than we actually know. It's to speak with a kind of lucidity, and it declares that God is worthy of all of our praises, that God is actually what my toddler needs, that God is actually what my neighbor needs, and God is actually what this Aboriginal tribe needs. Not more money, not more comfort. So singing makes for a good binding agent. The term is used in different areas. Maybe you guys who watch British baking shows, I don't watch them, I can't even pull the title out, that food has binding agents, like honey or cornstarch, maybe those are it. Or in construction, binding agents, like things that get two materials to stick together, like cements or glues. Singing is a good binding agent for the materials of Christians and God's promises. Singing binds us together. It renews our hope. It renews our faith. It renews our understanding of what is real and what is true. And when we do this, when we bind ourselves again to God's promises with praise, we are renewed. We are changed. Let's look through the second verse of this psalm, the second half, and see all of the ways that praising God renews us. First, in verse 6, there's renewed perspective. It says, "They set a net for my steps. My soul was bowed down. They dug a pit in my way, but they have fallen into it themselves." In verse 3 earlier, the verbs were in the future tense. God will send. God will shame. God will send. And here, the verbs have switched to past tense. Maybe the suffering and the hardship and the trouble has not gone away, but his perspective and his confidence he has been renewed. He has an eternal perspective on the situation. He knows that if his enemies have become the enemies of God, that God's victory will mean victory over his own enemies. Justice will come. Second, in verse 7 through 8, we see that there's a renewed heart. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make melody. Awake, my glory. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will awake the dawn. The trouble might not have gone away, but his heart is renewed and it's filled with a desire to sing. Third, in verses 9 and 10, we see a renewed awareness of others. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your steadfast love is great to the heavens, and your faithfulness to the clouds. When we suffer, our vision can be narrowed. We focus in on ourselves because we feel like we have to tend to our own wounds before we can give others our love and attention. And sometimes I'm not necessarily criticizing that. But when we sing praises to God in the midst of that, our vision is open again. We actually can be aware and love the people around us, even when we're suffering. Here, David wants to sing praises to those who are unbelievers, to those who are not followers of God. Sometimes the best evangelism strategy can simply be to be genuine about our thanksgiving and praises to God before people we know don't worship him. Finally, we get to the last verse of the psalm, the refrain that we saw earlier in verse 5. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. This time, coming from these renewings that we've just been looking at from verses 6 through 10, that refrain comes off a little bit different. In verse 5, it came off as a plea. David was in need of refuge, and he was praying for God to be glorified and for him to find his refuge in that. Here, we see that his vision has been renewed, his perspective, his heart, his awareness of others, and it comes across as a praise. This should be an encouragement to us. Week after week, year after year, we come into church on Sunday, a place where we sing. And if you're like me, oftentimes, we don't feel like singing. Maybe we are in need of help. Maybe we feel our troubles, or maybe we're just distracted. This psalm does not shame us for not feeling like singing, but it does encourage us to sing anyway in faith. The act of singing praises will strengthen your soul and renew your hope in the living God who acts on behalf of those who trust in him, even when their emotions are not in line with what they believe. Others of us will come in on Sunday morning happy, joyful in the living God. And it says in James 5, is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praise. So if that's you on a Sunday morning when we gather, lift up your voice joyfully. And unbeknownst to you, you may be lifting up the heads of those around you who don't feel the way that you do. And actually, this is how the Bible talks about singing in the church. I've talked a lot this morning about the benefits and the beauty of singing in our own personal souls. But actually, the way that the Bible talks about singing in the New Testament is very others-centered and others-focused. In Ephesians 4, Paul says that we are to address one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord in our hearts. Singing on a Sunday morning, we don't think of it like this because our chairs are all facing the front and we typically close our eyes or we look up or we look straight ahead. But singing is one of the main ways that God calls you to edify those around you on a Sunday morning. Whether you're joyful or whether you are the one who needs the edification, we're all called to sing together, to glorify God and to strengthen each other's hopes that God is true. The living God will help us. He can help and he will help us. I want to end our time by looking closely together at Hebrews 10, 23 and 25. So if you have a Bible, please turn to Hebrews 10, 23. It says this, let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more, as you see the day drawing near. This is one of the texts in the Bible that's most clear about why we gather once a week. That we are to gather once a week. It's commanded in Scripture. And it starts like this. He who promised is faithful. He is. Day to day and week to week, we struggle to believe that he can help. We struggle to believe that he will help. And it says over and over in the Bible, God has made promises to you, and he is faithful. He will keep them when you respond in faith. So we show up on Sunday mornings in the flesh. And whether we come in trouble or triumph, we sing together in faith. We bind ourselves afresh to God's promises that are our hope and our peace and our life with faith-filled praise. And through our singing, we edify one another to encourage one another as we see the day drawing near, as it says in this text. And we sing, "Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth," because we know, because of the mercy and tender love of God, that Jesus' victory, Jesus' glorification is our victory. It's our refuge in times of trouble. And Jesus is strong to lift us up today in our day of need, and he's strong to raise us up on the last day. He has come down from heaven to not lose any of those that the Father has given him, and to raise them each up on the last day because he loves us. So let's pray in closing together. Jesus, you are abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. We declare this morning that you can help and that you will help because of Jesus. Lord, you are the promise maker and the promise keeper, and you invite us to find ourselves in your strength and in your faithfulness. So Lord, may we find our peace if we come in trouble. May we voice our joy if we come happy in the living God. That you are great, that you are good, and that we have hope in this life that's full of suffering and full of pain and full of sickness, that we have hope, that you are faithful to your promises, and you will keep us and raise us up on the last day when we see you face to face. We pray all these things in your name. Amen.